Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Unexpected Points. I am your host, Kevin Cole. I have a very special guest here from the worldwide leader, Seth Walder, analytics writer, sports analytics writer, football guy, I would say a little bit, former beat writer for the Jets and the Giants, or just the Jets?
I had the 1 year at the end where I bounced between the two, but mostly just Jets.
Mostly just Jets. Actually, I didn't prep you for this other podcast, but you want to drop us with some Manish Mehta stories by any chance, or no?
No.
Okay, we'll take a no comment there, which makes sense. I
That
think
was
I've
a no
seen you no
comment.
comment him before in an article, which the people could go look that up if they want to find it here. But what we're going to talk about today, forget all that nonsense. Now that I've taken us completely off track, we're going to talk about today ranking and looking at some different NFL teams. So this will encompass front office, kind of their practices on the field, time management, all this sort of stuff that we whine about all the time, right? Nerds are always whining about this sort of stuff. So we want to take which teams really deserve the hour. You know, we have hashtag hour is a thing a little bit on Twitter for the Ravens or the Browns sometimes, or maybe even the Jaguars coming in, other teams that may be up, the Eagles, other teams that may be in there. So we're trying to figure out like what qualifies a team as actually fitting this bucket of being an analytically friendly team, not only that we can count on now, but we can count on in the future. And we'll be talking about the Chargers a little bit here because we thought we could count on him. And then they ruined, they massacred our boy. They massacred our boy for Brandon Staley. So we'll talk about that too. But before we get to that, ESPN, you got a bunch of stuff going on with different metrics, different other things that are going on. So I want to hit up a lot of that first. But let's start news. So it's like three portions here. Let's start a little bit of news here. And there's a bubbling calls, I would say. I see Arif Hassan was calling for it. I think I saw I'm not sure it was Mike Jones, someone at The Athletic talking about it. And others, I think maybe even of our own PFF _ Mike, who's a Green Bay Packers fan here. Mike Renner was talking about it. This whole idea of maybe sitting down Aaron Rodgers now. They're 4-8, the Packers, sitting him down, bringing in Jordan Love, seeing what you have. And a lot of people saying that this would pretty much lead to the dissolution of the marriage here between the Packers and Aaron Rodgers going forward, and seem to be okay with that. So, I'll give it to you first because I have my own takes. I'm being annoyed by this a little bit, as I am often by things on social media. Do you have any takes for me out of the gate with people saying this?
I'm weirdly neutral here, I think. I'm curious to hear what you say.
Yeah.
I totally get the desire to see Love, and he looked pretty good when he came in.
Yeah,
So
those nine dropbacks were against prevent defense were amazing.
yeah,
Actually, they
I
didn't do a
know.
very good job on the prevent also on the Christian Watson touchdown. But go ahead.
Still, I think I understand. It's so weird because like I just don't understand what the Packers' plan has been this entire time. Like they went so far in on Aaron Rodgers and then refused to get him a wide receiver, and I just don't understand how that makes sense in any way whatsoever. Um, they're not like eliminated, and the NFC is weak, so yeah, and Aaron
Not
Rodgers is
officially, yeah.
so. But they also have an easy out here. Like he's hurt, so everyone can save face, and you can move to Love, and you can see what happens, and you can just say, well, he was hurt, which is true. I don't know. I'm tempted by it. I think you're against this idea. You think they should stick
Well,
with
okay,
Rodgers
okay, okay. So I mean,
until the
I
end.
talked about this a little bit. We don't know that much. Like we don't know that much about Jordan Love, and maybe you could say what they've seen from him in practice doesn't give them a complete idea of how good he is either until you're in live action, until the bullets are flying when you're out down the field. I mean, maybe that's true. I think you get a decent idea of how good someone is via practice. This is his third season here. This is not like he's gone through rookie mini camp. You might not know what you have there. Famously, Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins was calling for Tom Savage to start rather than Deshaun Watson based on what they'd seen there. I mean, it makes some sense there. Now, Jordan Love, he was never even active as a rookie. Not great, right? It's probably, if you're not even at least the backup, is not great. He did have a start last year against the Chiefs. Not good at all. He played the second half of week 18, I believe, against the Detroit Lions. Again, not good at all. But and he's been good in some little spot starts here. And I don't know, just the way that they've approached having him, the discernible lack of any sort of buzz with him, and the fact that, of course, Rodgers got 2 MVPs, so he played into it. But the contracts that they gave Rodgers, this big contract, I mean, they desperately wanted him to come back, obviously, and to still play for them. So I don't know. All those signs point to me like Love may not be that guy, number one. So that's part of it. But I think the bigger point is, this is maybe a very unanalytical sort of take, is if you have a 4-time MVP, won a Super Bowl for you. Yeah, you didn't have the greatest playoff success, and I know Packers fans, like, I'm always amazed by how annoyed they are. Maybe a little spoiled there in Green Bay, and 4-time MVP. He back-to-back MVPs, coming off your probably a top 5, 6, 7 greatest quarterback of all time. Like, if he wants to play, let him play. Like, why? Like, doesn't he deserve it? Doesn't he? Don't you owe him that a little bit, versus the slight chance of getting a few games of seeing Jordan Love, and then I don't think he's magically going to become the next in the Favre, Rodgers lineage of Green Bay quarterback. So I guess that's probably it more than me than anything. If he wants to play until they're eliminated, at least if he wants to play through the thumb. He doesn't look like he's in physical decline. This is not Peyton Manning 2015 in the same sort of way. Why not just show him that respect and let him play?
Well, I think there's like probably a middle ground here that can maybe happen naturally, which is you just let Rodgers play again. Like this week, you lose again. That can be enough. You go to Love then, and it's all fine. Plus they have this, he's injured. It really, everyone can save face. Now I don't remember if I said that twice now. If I said to save face the first time.
Okay, I don't think so. Okay, well, I don't know.
I don't know, right? Did I say that?
Do you want to just start from the top, I guess? I don't even know now. Do you want me just to start with my Aaron Rodgers take again, or what? I don't even know. Yeah. It's fine if you repeat the same thing twice.
Let me just do what we were doing.
I repeat the same shit over and over again, constantly. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I think there's a middle ground here that like could probably play out naturally, which is you just let Rodgers play again. It's fine. Like you said, he's back-to-back MVPs, even if he's not playing nearly as well this year. They lose, and then you just go to Love a week later, and that's going to be, you're just trying to get a couple games out of him. So that probably accomplishes the same thing. So I think it's fine. And Rodgers is injured, so everybody sort of saves face all around. I do think it's interesting, like you said. Well, I feel like you should be able to tell in practice how good a guy is, and that does make me think totally different situation. But it does make me think about the Jets and Mike White coming in playing so well against the Bears. Granted, like we got to see it against a better defense, but if he keeps it up, it will look good for the Jets because they made this switch and the rest of the team is playing so well, but also look bad for the Jets because what were you waiting for if you had this guy on your bench and Zach Wilson was just throwing wins away?
Yeah. I mean, there's all this stuff comes out like when the vulture starts circling a little bit. So the vultures were circling a little bit on Zach Wilson, where they were saying even in the spring of this year that players were like, what the hell is going on here with these just spraying balls all over the place? So yeah, being able to execute things. I mean, I think back also to Patrick Mahomes. There was this buzz. There was a strong buzz around Patrick Mahomes. Even though he didn't play anything except for week 17 at that point. He did play week 17 as a rookie because it was a meaningless game for the Chiefs. But there was a strong buzz around how he'd been looking in practice and on the scout team and all that sort of stuff. So, anything's possible for Love. But I guess I would say, maybe not. Maybe not the strongest possibility to burn bridges with your, maybe the best player you've ever had. For your entire for your franchise, period. Probably not worth it for me. Okay, let's get to some of the metric stuff here, because I want to talk about the receiver metrics in particular, because this is a new thing this year that you guys have come out with. There's 3 different components to it. You score them on their ability to get open, their ability to generate yards after the catch, and then what's the third one? Would you say
Ability to make the catch?
Ability to make the catch. So okay, so give me an idea of like how these things are calculated. Not, you don't have to get into too much of the nitty gritty nerd shit sort of thing. And then I want to talk about like the applications of this sort of metric.
So Brian Burke created these metrics, and I think we're really excited about them. I'm really excited about them. The idea is to quantify players' abilities to have each of these three skills, which are core components of being a good receiver, individually based on sort of what I would say is the general context, which might be, if we're thinking about catch, let's think about catch score for a second as an example. The general context, which might be what route were they running against what coverage, was there play action on the play, how long after the snap was the throw thrown, the ability to generate catches over expectation based on that general context, and then that local context, which is, okay, here's where everyone is 0.2 of a second before the ball is thrown. Where are they compared to the defenders? Do they have good leverage, right? So I think, to me, it's using player tracking data to set expectations on multiple levels and then find out who is performing over or under expectations. The quarterback is also part of that expectation too. So we're trying as hard as it may be to separate quarterback from receiver. And if you think about like open score, to me, the thing that is so crucial here is two elements. One, we're calculating it on targets and non-targets. So I think that's a pretty neat change. I know that's something that PFF, you guys have shifted to as well. And to me, that's so crucial, right? Because we all know that there are players that are getting open that don't get the ball every time. Certainly earning targets is a skill, but not every time. And the other thing is that it's not measuring separation. I think we thought of separation as being openness, and they're two different things. They're related sometimes, but not always. And the example I always give is like, if I'm running a go route and you're defending me, and we have 1 yard of separation at the time of the ball being thrown, am I open? Well, I don't know. It depends. If I'm 1 yard behind you and we're running the same speed, I'm not open at all. If I'm 1 yard past you and I'm running slightly faster than you, I'm extremely open. And so it's using the player tracking data in that way to understand like actually positioning and leverage to quantify openness. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how much does it matter? Like, is this just a general openness? And like, if it's a blown coverage, if you have, let's say, double teams are probably something that's not as much of a real thing as some people think, but there are definitely shaded coverages towards certain players, things like that. Like, those are things I could see influencing the score. And again, we have this score on the basis of, I don't know if it's I guess it's like a 0 to 100 sort of metric.
Yeah, it's a 0 to 99 score. And so this is a good question. So the blown coverage is just, you're going to look really open. I mean, if you, it is. So you'll get credit for that. The double coverages, it's like you said, it's not double coverage, but you do get maybe safety help or defenders shaded towards you. And that is something that the model is essentially, is factoring in. Are you getting the way that it sees it is, are you getting extra attention from defenders? And then that's sort of within the context of how open you get. So if the safety is shaded towards you or playing you versus your teammate, then that is part of that context, that there is an adjustment in there for that.
Okay. And then when we're thinking of this score, as far as on a play-by-play level basis being open or not, is it like a binary on a play level basis, which then rolls up, or can you be super open, or like what's the levels of openness that we're talking about here?
It's not binary. It's the whole every play. We're not like, ultimately every play is scored, so there is a scale, and it's capped. So if it's a blown coverage, it's not going to skew your entire score just because of that one play. But there is a full score relative to expectation for each play. And actually, like for openness, if you are targeted, it's looking at two different situations. It's looking at both your openness at the time of 2/10 before the ball is thrown and at the time of ball arrival too.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the receivers that we see, because I'm interested in the open category first, because at least intuitively for me, maybe I'm wrong about this, but versus catch, let's say this catch score. I don't know if you guys have done work looking at the stability of these metrics, but to me, it seems like the open score would be more stable than a catch score, only knowing that contested catch rate, or something that we would track, is it's not going to be as data rich as yours, as big of a sample as yours, because there's only a handful of contested catches for certain players, but it could be all over the place, the contested catch rate for certain players. Would you agree that the open score is more, there's more stability there, or not?
No, it is. It is. The open score is the most stable of these. So like, to me, they're listed in order of importance: open, catch, yak, as far as I'm concerned. Like, and it doesn't mean they're also, I like them all together because there's a stylistic description within them. But if I'm choosing a receiver that can be exceptional at one of the three areas, it's certainly openness. It correlates the strongest with yards per route run. It is the most stable, like you said.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so let's look at some of the receivers who are here near the top. So I see A.J. Brown is number one. Pretty decent margin between him at a 97 and then Tyreek Hill at 89, Tyler Lockett, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, Darius Slayton. Oh, they were trying to kick this guy to the curb all offseason, and now Darius Slayton hive is big on here. You if you get a result like Darius Slayton being out there, not that it's wrong, what do you think about it?
So he's, like, to me, really interesting. I'm going to include him. I'm doing a story next week on like breakouts players, and he's going to be on the list. I'm going to dive deeper into him. So I'm going to look closely at this one. The reason why Slayton is fascinating. So like AJ Brown, right? You mentioned he's a 97 this year. He was a 99 last year. So like, we can see the year after year for a lot of these guys that are high performers are going to be high performers year after year. Darius Slayton, if you look back, and on 538, we have all this, so you can see everyone's score. You can look at past years. You can type in, like I'm doing right now, Darius Slayton. And what is wild to me about Darius Slayton is that if you look at his open scores from 2019, 2022, it is 42, 42, 29, 87. I mean, his overall tracking metrics last year, he was by this measure, had one of the worst scores among all receivers a year ago. And so when he's like fighting for a roster spot, I was like, earlier this season, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like you're approaching Robbie Anderson territory. This year's totally different with the open
Robbie
score.
Anderson catching strays. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. He's Darius Slayton. So like what I have to wonder about is, new scheme. So he is running different. He's running different types of routes. So we're controlling for route type, but is it possible that he is maybe excelling in certain routes, like better than he was? Like he was running a ton of comebacks last year, and he's not doing that as much, and he's running more crossers in the Daboll offense. I have to wonder if that's a factor. But I'm going to take a closer look at him. But yeah, he's like, this year's a complete change, totally different person.
Yeah. Well, he also has only 44 targets this year, which
smaller is sample for him.
Yeah. So not as many, and that is, I assume that
fewer routes just in general.
Fewer routes, right? Yeah. Okay, I see the routes here, 207. So yeah, that's going to be fewer than most people. So that makes some sense there. And his catch score is not that great. How much is catch score just like drops?
It's
or is it contested catches? I mean, what do you think influences it more?
So, I mean, yes, I don't know about more. Drops are treated in a like it's not. They're specifically treated as a drop, so it does penalize you, like much more severely. And I think it's a factor. I I don't know. It'd be hard for me to, like, Brian would have to have the answer if we were like trying to say like, oh, 60-40 contested catch first drop. But yeah.
Okay. And then another thing I was looking at here, I was looking at Yak here. And I think we could say that because Deebo Samuel's number 1. And then I see Brandon Ayuk at number 9. George Kittle is down at 17, but still pretty high up there, especially when it comes to, well, I guess there are a handful of tight ends that are who are higher than his is there. Now, those guys, I think we would say, independent of the offense, are probably pretty good at generating yards after the catch. But at the same time, it is an offense that is predicated on generating yards after the catch, either out of design or for the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be an air yards type of guy, which are you're getting more of those air yards to the sideline, down the field, things, other sorts of pockets that he doesn't really throw the ball into as much. If you see something like that, like how do you think about, are we including something from is there a 49ers boost that some of these players are getting, even though, like, optically we would say these guys are really good after the catch? I always wonder about disentangling those two things though. And how we think about that, because Jimmy Garoppolo was pretty good in limited time in 2017 before any of these guys were on the team, at generating at least a high yards per attempt, which was generated primarily through Yak also.
I think so the goal is certainly to disentangle them, right? And
yes.
it is relative to expectation. So it's based on the positioning of the players at the time of positioning, speed, orientation of the players at the time of reception. Theoretically, that should disentangle, but I think we have to recognize that there are schematic factors that could maybe still be creeping in there. I wish I had in front of me, because we do calculate a team level RTMs, as we say that we aren't on 538 just yet. And I would love to, now that you mention it, I want to go back and just look at the Shanahan offense over the past few years, like pre-Debo, and see if it's always been so high. I think what you're saying is potentially, like, yeah, is it feasible that there's a 49ers boost in the Yak score? I don't think that's crazy at all.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at it. Marquise Goodwin, 27th in his Yak score back in 2017 on here, so not that great versus these other guys. So maybe, but then again, it's including a lot of like non-Jimmy time in that, because we only played the last 5 games of the season at least. Okay, so big picture with this sort of stuff.
Bourne, I'll just say Kendrick Bourne 2019 was a 63 Yak score. In 2021 with the Patriots, he had a 74 Yak score. So that's
okay. So so there's some stability beyond team there in scheme and quarterback and all that stuff. Okay, so like application. Let's talk about application here. Other than fodder for like TV arguments or whatever you're going to use, some Twitter arguments on this, which is good. I'm all for that.
Podcast arguments.
Yeah, podcast arguments, of course, but we try to keep things a little more civil on the podcast. What would you think are like the best applications of this is it potentially even within, like, from a coaching perspective of saying like, this guy seems to be getting open a lot, but we're not throwing him the ball? Is it you're looking at free agency? Trade is a little bit to a lower. So you're looking at free agency, and like maybe there's this guy where, let's face it, it's all production based, right? What these guys are going to get paid when they go someplace else. There's probably not much beyond that. You could say, here's a low production player who may have been misused or not utilized enough by his previous team, things like that. Like, where do you see the applications, and what could I be missing beyond that?
So I think, to me, like from a team standpoint, it's probably personnel first and foremost, like in terms of acquiring free agents or making trades. I think there is an opportunity to find undervalued players who maybe were getting open and weren't getting targeted, or it just didn't, or like you're playing the regression game, like we've talked, like you mentioned with catch score, right? A guy who maybe was sort of an average catch score player, and they have a down year, and you might figure, okay, that's probably a decent chance to bounce back. I think about a guy like, okay, so when you said, like, what happens when you get a weird result? When we were when Brian was putting this together, we're looking at initial results. You'll notice that 2020 Jacoby Myers has a 99 open score, and we were like, okay, something's up there, like that. Okay, that seems a little weird.
Yeah.
Like him and Devontae Adams, 99 open score. Okay, that's so we started going through the plays, and more than anyone I've seen when I've gone through, there were play after play where Myers was open and he went untargeted by Cam Newton. And I think that if you're in that situation where if he's a free agent in that, that next year, maybe you're looking at him. I mean, he's a free agent this year. I think he's probably going to get paid quite a bit. And I think, to me, like from a team, from a real football standpoint, there's quite a bit of application in that way. And then I think fantasy gambling, sports betting, there's probably applications there too. And I think use it that way as well.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I like this Jacoby Myers example that you're mentioning and the Cam Newton part of it specifically, because, I mean, as well as I do that when you have something and you have a result like this, you get the haters, right? The haters are out. And what annoys me is like the context crowd, right? Everything else, like if it doesn't have fully 100% contextual everything, then you might as well just take the result and just throw it out and it's worthless. But like, is Jacoby Myers the best receiver in the NFL at getting open? Probably not, right? Like, I think we can be confident even if we have a result that tells us that. But does that mean that it's not like useful what we're looking at here, this sort of score? And I think that's probably a huge differentiator when we're talking about these sort of things, is how useful or not it is to have this and then be able to dig in further, like you're saying, and look further at Jacoby Myers, who I think since then has proven himself to be a pretty reliable, good receiver there. A guy who's showing up constantly.
Can I say one thing about that really quick?
Go ahead.
The other thing I think is like within the context, right? Well, I do want to mention this when we talk about guys who are not targeted when they are open. People say, well, the progression didn't get to him, or the play wasn't designed for him. And that's okay, because it's not always an indictment on the quarterback when there's an open player. But would you rather the guy, even if he is the third or fourth progression, would you rather the guy that's covered as a third or fourth progression, or the guy who managed to break free of his man? And so, like, to me, that's still like a good indicator for what I would want in a player, even if it wasn't like the quarterback's quote unquote fault that he didn't throw him the ball or something.
Yeah, no, I want an alpha though, who's going to be yelling at the quarterback on the sideline, and the coaches and everyone else until he gets up into the first guy on the read here. Let's talk Deontay Johnson, because I'm looking here. 2020, he's right near the top. 2021, he's basically like a top 5-ish sort of guy every single year. And I think he does get open. He gets targeted a lot. At least he did. He's not getting targeted as much this season as he has in prior seasons. But even this season, you have him, his open score is tied with Stephon Diggs, who I think everyone recognizes as being a premier route runner. Is there anything like being able to quantify the type of stuff that Deontay Johnson does versus the type of stuff? I don't know, like let's look at Tyreek Hill or someone else, or AJ Brown or someone else like that. Like, there's probably just less of a benefit to his openness, if that makes sense, for the team than for some of these other receivers. Meaning, like, even if he is open, meaning you're more likely to complete the pass. Like, what's your upside with Deontay Johnson? I don't know what his, I should look at what his ADOT is, but it's been pretty tiny in the past. Maybe that's a function of quarterback, of course.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I wonder if that's a rough.
But, there's also this whole thing of like Frisco Josh, friend of the pod, Josh Hermsmeyer. He's very much of a believer. And I think like nothing is binary, but we like to talk about these things in a very, overconfident sort of way, where his, running backs don't matter. If we're applying to this is, like, receivers control ADOT. The receivers control ADOT. And I think there is an element to that. I mean, if you look at Tua this season, there's a new scheme. I'll give you that. But his ADOT is up like 2 yards, basically, versus what it was in the past, although his time to throw is not really any different this year. Alex Smith probably had a similar thing in 2017. All of a sudden, the guy's like the best deep passer in the NFL when he's playing with Tyreek Hill. So I do wonder a little bit on that. Like, again, how can we think about this in terms of like what their yards per maybe target sort of number can also be in this situation?
His
make sense or not?
target is up a little bit. He was 8.0 in 2020, 8.4 in 2021, 9.4 this year. I mean, I think the quarterback change has to be some factor there.
Right. Yeah, but it's amazing because his number is pretty strong. I mean, I know they already re-signed him to a deal, which was a fairly modest price, but his number is very, very strong. Seems like year in and year out on this one. I
agree though. He's one that stands out to me. I've been sort of like looking at, from a fantasy and betting standpoint, these guys who have had strong open scores and then haven't been producing in the previous weeks, and looking for guys that pop, right? Like I put a small bet on Garrett Wilson to go over 100 yards this week, which narrowly missed, killed me. Like in spirit, I won that bet, like with Wilson, with Chris
can you buy anything? Can you go to the store and use spirit to go buy some groceries?
I wish. With Ayuk early in the year, with Olave, with Garrett Wilson. Like, to me, I've been waiting. Johnson is the one that I'm waiting to pop. He's the next guy. All the others have sort of, as I've looked at the strong open scores, they've all had like an explosion game, and then still waiting for Deontay Johnson.
Still waiting there. Okay, let's think. I'm going to think about anything else that could play here. Have you ever seen anything on here if there is like a progression as far as a receiver? I mean, I see that the only reason I thought of this is I saw that Garrett Wilson is pretty high up here. Do you know if this is something that changes a lot, like through a receiver's career? Receivers, at least traditionally, had been pretty slow to develop as rookies. Now that's not the case nearly as much, but still, it's about a second-year breakout or anything else. Have you ever looked at any of that sort of stuff?
That's a good no. Like, the short answer is no, I haven't. But I'm trying to think of examples like Justin Jefferson popped right away, but we know that Justin Jefferson was amazing as a rookie. So that's less like, I wonder like a Godwin. I'm trying to see like if I kind of liked Godwin right away from an open score perspective. So I don't know. I would have to take like a longer look at it. I like that thought though. I wonder.
That's an interesting one. Maybe
tight ends really. I think that.
Yeah, tight end's another one where it takes a little while to develop. I see.
Right.
Kyle Pitts down here in the 40s.
God, right, exactly. Or like
on my fantasy team.
Njoku, I think would be. Well, he only qualifies a couple of years, but like Njoku, I think would be to some degree a slow riser.
Right. And then on the flip side, and apologies to a great career, AJ Green here at number last here at number 99, because the talk was like when tracking data was coming into play, there was a little bit of a discussion / concern maybe amongst like an agent community for older players. They're like, these teams are going to use their speed to like say the player's getting older and then try to cut them or not pay him as much or this or that. What do you think about that on the flip side, like being able to gauge a player's decline?
I mean, that's true for every, like I remember that argument,
Yeah.
The same number of players are in the NFL no matter what. Like the salary cap is the same no matter what. We're measuring players' decline all the time. Like, we are watching players get worse always. And AJ Green was an amazing receiver, but it doesn't mean that he can't be bad now. And like,
no, I always think the arguments again, like, because it was in the context of running backs. Like, it absolutely shocks me. because people are idiots on Twitter. There's no like that. That's another thing I always have to remind myself. And a good reminder of this is like when you listen to someone on a podcast, you're like, oh, this person sounds pretty good. And then you go to their Twitter and you're like, oh my God, like what the hell happened here? That people are not like their Twitter feeds, but it always shocked me
like
that
if you follow this Kevin Cole on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, I try. I did have a little comment though about Aaron Rodgers. Someone in an article, so at least I'm not quote tweeting the person, had an article about like scouts talking about his body language is negative, so he's packing it in or something like that. And it's like, dude, Aaron Rodgers is the master of negative body language his entire career. Like, are you kidding me? But anyway, yeah, there's people with like legitimate followings who, when you make a running backs don't matter sort of argument, they say like they say, you know, I'm convinced that you don't want to hold down their salaries, and that's the reason you're making this argument. Like people with actual followings will say stuff like that, and it's like, dude, don't you understand? The money goes somewhere else if it doesn't go to the running back. Like, what is so special about this one person that it becomes like a political argument or something like that?
I completely agree. It doesn't make any sense. If this player is declining, we measure they're declining and they get cut because their team realizes that they're declining. It means there's another guy who's getting an opportunity and is going to get paid. Like that roster spot opens. Yeah,
especially in the rookies, if anything. These guys probably deserve to get paid a lot more than what they are. Okay, so big picture here. Is there any adjustments, additions, other stuff that we're going to see how this can be applied? You mentioned betting as part of this. How would you think that like a betting angle on something like this?
So I don't, this is like speculation at this point. We haven't studied enough on a week-to-week basis. I'm saying like the way that what I mentioned, I think will be, you know, things where you have
like a player prop angle, or do you think you can even go like as far as X player is not playing? How can this affect the team sort of angle?
More as a prop angle, you know, a player like an early season disparity between, you know, they're a player that gets open, they're still getting open. They used to catch like at an average rate. Now they've had a couple drops. Like, is there an opportunity there to find like an undervalued player or someone like to spot an Olave or a Garrett Wilson who are playing with bad quarterbacks, but actually come into the league and are playing really well right away. And maybe that's for dynasty league fantasy, or maybe it's for player props and I don't know, like this is like for me, this is like, okay, what's areas of research, like things I'll probably look at in the off season to try and see what do we see here when we have these ratings, can we gain anything on the market or in terms of fantasy that could be useful? And I'm going to guess yes. Like I suspect that we will find something interesting, but I don't know yet. Like at this point, I'm still just guessing.
Okay, well, I'll be interested to see what happens there. This actually kind of leads me into another topic that I want to discuss before getting into looking at some of the front offices in the NFL or the team structures in the NFL for analytics. There's like a more of an explicit thing about betting now, obviously, with the legalization everywhere. You know, DraftKings, everything is DraftKings being sponsoring everything in the entire world. Even ESPN and broadcast and other things is a lot more explicit, tying it into it. I know that you're going through your own personal journey here, betting against Nick Bosa and losing on a weekly basis on his sacks. But again, you're just claiming everything and everything. So then my question is, and this has been a sticking point with, talk about toxic Twitter, like the betting, Seville, as they call them, as they call it, like the toxicity of something like that, where they would point out, you know, they would look at ESPN's football power index or something like that and say, how can you have this when the market's way over here, this like that? Do you have to start thinking about the market more generally when you're talking about these different metrics? Do you think because of the fact that betting is now such an explicit part of things, do you think people can differentiate between something being useful like FPI versus you should bet based on this sort of knowledge, those sorts of things? How do you think about that generally? Because I'm a little ambivalent on this sort of thing, like whether or not, even if it's not explicitly tied into betting, whether or not you kind of just have to respect the market so much that if you have something that's nonsensical by the market or off from the market, if you can even put it out there and think that and just, you know, think that, well, we've disclosed everything, so then it doesn't matter, sort of thing.
I mean, you're asking a question of like something that I've sort of wrestled with in my head for years. I think like
Right.
even though the betting market was, or like with the way we talked about betting when I first got to ESPN, and not like I think my first year I wrote a college football weekly story, and it was like, here is FPI and here are the betting lines, and
Right.
that's all I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so like obviously things have changed quite a bit, and I don't know. It's really hard, I think, because, well, even if we put something out that beat the market, it wouldn't in the long term because it's public, right? Like if you actually had something that had value, which college FPI did for a long time, eventually it will go away.
Yeah. Especially versus like midweek closing lines, whatever it would be. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we certainly use the betting like respect for the market. Yeah. I mean, that's how we compare our accuracy, and yeah, we're thinking about those things all the time. Like you mentioned my sack props, like I built a sack model and I'm trying to figure out if that can work. And, I'm, like you said, I'm trying to do that in the least like touty way possible. I'm not touting these picks. I'm just for like taking you along with me on this journey. But, yeah, I think measuring against the market is really important. But yeah, are there going to be times like where you have a result that's like so wildly off of course. And that's, it's just really tricky. Okay. Like in the sack, there's a difference, right? Like in FPI, we can't sort of, if something is weird, we can't ignore it. Whereas if I know that there's a situation has changed, player's role is totally different this week because of something that's totally independent of them, and then I'm going to be way off on, then I just don't need to bet that number. So that's fine. And I know that it's going to, right. But I don't know. I'm talking all over the place because Kevin, this is a tricky one for me. I think it really is a difficult question and one to wrestle with. But at the same time, I think like when we talk about betting, I would rather us do it from a standpoint of like using quantitative analysis, right? Alongside it, right? As opposed like we could also just spit out and say, I think this guy's going to score the first touchdown because I feel like it. And like that's betting content too, but I would rather do it in a quantitative analysis standpoint. But it's certainly hard when you're comparing to the market, no question.
Yeah, but what about even if it's not necessarily betting? Like, what is the reaction if you can? Maybe this is all top secret information, but behind the scenes, when I don't know, we already mentioned him twice. I've mentioned him every podcast. I feel like when Ben Baldwin's roasting you guys for something, I don't know what it is, like win probability or the draft model or FPI or something. Like behind the scenes, is there a thought of like, oh, yeah, this does kind of look pretty squirrely, or is it kind of just like, fuck that guy? Why does he keep roasting us?
Love Ben. I think
not fuck that guy generally, but just like in this instance, we got to just let it go,
Total like wide range. I mean, I don't think we're like tracking that closely. I think there's certainly like let me say this. It all depends because the answer is like there are times when we put out so much stuff, right? Like, so we have not just our receiving metrics, not just FPI, but we're doing college basketball and we're doing all of our win rates and college football and everything, right? Like here, we've got a really weird one in college football right now. We have where we are overly bullish on Ohio State to make the playoff and bearish on USC. And we know that. And I think, so it all depends. There are times when I think like there's like some super valid criticism. I think there's times when it's not, and it just depends on the situation. I think, in the Ohio State one, like, yeah, I think that we are overly strong on Ohio State and we are not on USC. And I think that I understand the reasons why that's the case, but it remains true that we are.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on a matter of degree also. I mean, I think 538 section, like famously on some of their stuff, like I want to think about basketball probably, will just be like widely off from what a betting line will say for who will win a series or something like that. So then it also breaks into, sometimes you'll have, the media personalities or analysts or whoever, like quoting the stuff. And that's when it gets a little complicated for me. If they say like, oh, the Celtics have a 50% chance of winning this series, when the betting markets are telling you they have like a 15% chance or something like that against the Warriors, depending upon the score in this time. So that, I guess that's another thing where, like, I just don't know. Like, I get it. Like, I understand that, but I don't know how much like other people necessarily understand that.
Let me ask you a question about this, because we were in this, like, just like 538, we were really high on the Celtics going into that. And we were also super high on the Celtics going into the Nets series, which I think the Nets were slightly favored and the Celtics went.
Yeah.
But we talk about, but at the same time, like, if we're so strong, and I don't remember what the number was, but we were really strong on the Celtics. And I think we would say that we were too strong, or we were actually really probably underrating the Warriors based on how things were going. It's like, we look at it, BPI last season globally performed, like, its overall accuracy was very good if you compare it to Vegas. And so then we start thinking about, like, do we need to worry about not just global accuracy, but like local accuracy? And I don't know the answer to that, but I wonder, and we're making content. And so, we want it to, it can also just be window dressing around SportsCenter when it's, sometimes it's weird because you have a weird result and weird results happen. Other times it can be like a talking point. Other times it could be that there's like an insight that we're not thinking about. It spans the gamut, but I think it's all interesting questions. It's all things we think about all the time.
Yeah. I guess probably what maybe one of the decisions is like, how much do you want to actually use the betting markets as data, right, in what you're doing? Because that would be part of like Massey Peabody and what they do there with Rufus Peabody and Cade Massey. I mean, like, they regress based upon betting stuff. I'm sure, I'm not the one controlling our power rankings and other stuff, but I'm sure that stuff is explicitly part of that also. So I don't know, maybe it's like a hedge a bit there, but then if you want to be an independent source, if you want to say, we're not just going to like spit out what the betting market tells you, plus or minus, 5% win probability in certain circumstances, then I get, ignoring it in some circumstances.
And we've gone back and forth on that. So there have been like, we've actually moved away from the betting market because of what you said. We're in a way, some people, in a way, it feels like cheating when you use the betting market. And I don't know. I go back and forth because for a while I was like a huge proponent of let's detach from Vegas and then we get the most interesting. And I don't know, but at the same time, like, I think we all agree that there's like a lot of value in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think what it comes down to is hopefully, consumers of this sort of stuff get more and more educated and then can make better decisions, or at least have better context for what they may be hearing. Okay, let's get to the main part here, although maybe it's not even necessarily the biggest part here. So I want to go through and figure out which teams here we can give the moniker of our team based upon their analytical sophistication, reliability for maybe making good decisions, maybe a thoughtful, intentional process, as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah would say in Minnesota. You famously track all of the different staffers for all the different teams, all the different analytics staffers. If anyone, you're like the Adam Schefter of a 22-year-old is now leaving his internship to go work as a junior analyst at some at some team somewhere. You need that breaking news. You're the guy there. So you probably have a better idea even than I do of what's going behind the scenes here. Maybe we'll even go back for it. Let's try like drafting teams and then giving an idea for it. So I'll give you first, like, what team, if you were to pick any team to give that sort of moniker to, assuming like coaching decisions, maybe the dynamic between coaches and front office, obviously the fourth down stuff and whatever, but it can go well beyond that. Maybe how they approach the draft, their staffing, their ability or willingness to adapt, and then also an idea of what sort of sustainability we may have here. So it's not fly by the seat of your pants and you just happen to, like riverboat Ron one year, and then the next year you're just back to being as conservative as Bill Belichick.
Is this our hashtag our teams, or are we just thinking of these as being analytically advanced? And I think that there's only one team that makes a difference for, which is like Cleveland. I'm not sure I want, like, I'm not.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Like,
Yes. Okay.
Cleveland is not
Okay. Yes. That's a good one. That's a good
team.
one. I mean, you can caveat when it comes to the Browns. I've had this discussion many a time in the offseason, and I've actually found myself recently when discussing Deshaun Watson's return, like kind of being bad about not. This is another one. You're walking this line of like, do I want to say for the 50,000th time that I think this guy is like probably has committed some very heinous acts, most likely, and it's probably a good time to talk about it though. So yeah, if you want to differentiate based on that, I'm all for that.
I do want to differentiate. I think it's good to talk about like, especially now, but like where it's like, yeah, I think the Browns were betting on the idea that people would talk about all the allegations against Deshaun Watson, and then they would just like go back to talking about him as a football player only. And like that seems like that feels gross to me. In fact, I've had such in the off season, really, I guess we haven't really been talking about Watson at all.
Right.
There was like, I just felt like I had such a hard time sort of evaluating like the football Browns because of that. So I will say,
I mean, I'm also thinking part of it, maybe this is not part of it. I think you can use is maybe you don't even have to differentiate in a way. And maybe this is another way where I'm not necessarily as like analytically focused as some people may be on these certain things, is like, hey, creating a workplace and employing people who you feel like, are like respectful human beings and create whatever, like that's important too, like not having, in a different sense, not having a bunch of like assholes basically, or coaches who make you miserable and stuff like that could also be something that's important, even if they are winners, in a certain way. So if you want to use that as part of your qualifications, go ahead.
What I'll say is this: if you're asking me who is the most analytically advanced team, I would say the Browns. So right. I think my annual survey is coming out next week of analytics staffers, so you can see what they said on this. But I think I would still choose the Browns. They have a very large staff. I think that there's probably no team that thinks about that makes decisions with more quantitative analysis like intertwined in that decision-making process. I mean, this is all like, what you hear from people what they hear. But I think Cleveland probably is that. Like I said, I wouldn't hashtag our them because of the, more than 24 women who have accused Watson of sexual assault or sexual misconduct or inappropriate behavior. From an analytics standpoint, I think I would choose the Browns. I'll say this, I'll tease this in my survey. One person who left the Browns off their ballot entirely gave an answer, a perspective that I thought was interesting, which I'm going to save, but it was related to Watson in this thought, which I thought was just an interesting perspective.
All right. Well, we'll stay tuned for that. The only thing I'll say, Browns, and just again to separate the things, like I probably ad nauseum was talking about this stuff in the offseason and should do more regards Watson. But in the other thing, the one thing that I question a little bit about their team and their front offices, the ability to make a hard choice to not like to let someone go in some circumstances. I think at best, Njoku is proving me wrong so far, but I would have put this in the category. But when it comes to Denzel,
wrong on him.
Yeah, when it comes to Denzel Ward, when it comes to, I don't know, maybe Nick Chubb, again, maybe getting proven wrong there too, but still, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, you give him some more contracts, you're spending a lot of money there. Myles Garrett is fine. But the ability to just say, maybe we don't give a guy top of the market contract who is a maybe more in like the 5 to 10 range sort of thing
Mhm.
for the players. So that's the only thing I'd say. I don't know, like they haven't let those guys go. They have a ton of money tied up. I mean, we'll see what they're going to do next year. In a lot of ways, the fact that they're splitting the baby here with this Watson
Mhm.
suspension means that in some ways for them it could have been better if he missed the entire season, because then his contract would have told, and he has like a
It would have been
$5
1
million
million.
cap hit or something like that in his first year, and next year it's going to jump up to 50 something million. So I don't know how they're going to build. So I guess that's maybe a little bit of a concern, is like, do you have this long-term-ish sort of vision versus pressing a lot of chips in at this point in time? But they would not be unique in that fashion at all. Okay, so if I was going to go next on here, let me look at your little sheet here. This will help me figure out to make sure I know what I want here. I mean, I guess I still go with the Ravens now, just based upon the body of work. I know we got some, middle linebackers drafted, brought in, off-ball linebackers being brought in. We got a safety and a center drafted in the first round this last year. We got a running back drafted a couple years ago. But I think I would still put them, just because I have a lot of confidence in how they built things there, how Eric DaCosta there. I've had some conversations with people like Daniel Stern and others who helps work with Harbaugh and what he's doing there. And now they've pressed their advantages, I think, somewhat with Lamar Jackson and others and what they've done there. I don't know. I think I'm still putting them second, especially because of this like reliability sort of function. Some of that is self-fulfilling positive feedback loop. Like, you're good and you get a bunch of comp picks and this and that, but they still know how to play the game and how to press their advantages in that regard, which helps that sustainability function. And they let players go. I mean, they definitely let players go, and then, bring them back sometime, right? Yeah. So they're definitely willing to do that, and I think that's important from the sustainability function. And I think that's why I would have them. They're still are Ravens for me. You don't have any quibbles with that, I assume.
No quibbles. I'll be curious to see if they trade for Roquan Smith and then let him go, which I don't think is crazy at all. In fact,
I don't think so. Yeah, I'd have to see what they're always one of these teams where they never really have a situation where, because you can get offset if you sign guys. So they did make a big signing this offseason. But next season I don't think they're going to. So I don't think they'll have to worry about an offset there.
It's like if their plan was just to acquire him, feeling like they had a really good team this year and try and give a boost, and then they let him go, knowing that they're not going to make a bunch of free agent signings, so they're going to get that comp pick, then in that way they didn't pay that much. It's a rental, but like to me, like it's kind of a different thing than when you pay a substantial amount for. Like, now it's like they've paid the pick, but then they're going to essentially not have the comp pick and pay him a contract if they decide to re-sign him. So I wonder if they'll do that. I have no quibble with that. I would take the Eagles next.
Eagles, okay.
And I think, to me, the Eagles, even though so they obviously had Doug Peterson, they had the fourth down bonanza in their Super Bowl year. I think that's a sign of a larger organizational philosophy, even though Peterson is gone. To me, they're aggressive, but usually smart with their aggression. You go make a trade where you deal a first round pick and sign a player, like that player has to be amazing and at a premium position, and it was, because it was AJ Brown and a wide receiver. They were taking advantage of their window. That team is like pretty stacked just across the board. I think they've always done a great job of building through the trenches. You make light bets Robert Quinn. Like, to me, that's a great kind of small, a great kind of I'm a contender bet. A veteran rental going to just come in and potentially get you some sacks. Like, that's worth it to me. So I think Philly, I think they certainly have. Alec Hallaby is the assistant GM there. He's the highest ranking non-GM analytics person in the league right now. I think that's a strong sign too.
Yeah. No, I think they would be next for me. And again, it comes to the sustainability function. I mean, maybe it all falls apart if there's no Howie Roseman there, but I think a lot of times this stuff comes from ownership, right? And I do think that that's part of it in that regard. Okay, so I'm a little torn here. Next, and
I agree. I think there's 2 teams you can select here.
I think I probably have a team that I have a particular affection for that you may not have in here that I may end up choosing anyway. So what I'm going to say is I'm just going to throw it in more for controversy than anything else. But I really love what the Jaguars are doing from a coaching standpoint. And this is something where the problem is I don't know about the sustainability, because for observers who may have been watching the Jaguars for a while, the son of Shad Khan, so the owner's son, Tony Khan, who has varying degrees of influence there. I don't know exactly how much it's been or not, but he was definitely more friendly as far as looking at analytics and building up that sort of function and building up the research sort of function here. And way back when, God, the name is escaping me now, because I think he's on the Twins now. But they had a director of research there.
Adler.
I'm sorry?
Dan Adler.
Yes, exactly. Daniel Adler was there. So he was there a long time ago, kind of like way, way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Now they had some dark times during the Tom Coughlin era. And they kind of pivoted. They pivoted in a very, very much a wrong direction in that regard. Trent Baalke, whatever you want to say about Baalke, I'm not with him there. But I think Doug Peterson is kind of going to be the guy to run the ship here. Of course, they brought in Ryan Paganetti, who had co-hosted with me for a little bit on this podcast and others. And what they're doing, at least when I'm watching them play, the way that they're not only structuring the offense, they're working with Trevor Lawrence. They're using him on the ground a lot more. They're designating plays that are better for him. And just the way they're executing on a 4th down basis, and beyond that, a game management sort of basis. I think like the non-spike that they did last week on 1st down, on the final drive, they had a 27-yard gain. There's less than 30 seconds left on the clock. I think almost all teams would have spiked in that situation. They probably didn't need the 4 downs, but you never know, right? You never know if you need the 4 downs.
I cannot stand when people spike.
This wouldn't even have been an egregious one.
Yeah, it would have been a
borderline one. Yeah. Because they might not have had time even to run 4 plays. Anyway, but I think what people don't understand is that is an opportunity if you are prepared. If you're prepared, that's an opportunity to have a delta and to get an advantage over the defense that may not be as prepared in that exact situation, where you're giving them a chance to prepare also by spiking it. As you're not only giving yourself a chance to prepare, you're giving them a chance to prepare. So being able to press that advantage and go right away with the play and then score the touchdown, and then going for 2 was good enough. And that's I don't know. I like a lot of what I'm seeing from them. And they're also a team where I think they played a lot better than their record and can build forward and maybe take a leap next year. So I'm going to throw them in there, even though front office wise, I don't know. I can't. I know they overpaid for Christian Kirk, but it seems like it's okay maybe sometimes for a receiver. Anyway, so I'm going to throw them in there because I'm just so high on Doug Peterson.
I would not have had Jacksonville there. It's not that I'd like, to me, they're sort of on this list. They're moving up. But you mentioned organizational sustainability previously, and in the offseason prior to the 2021 season, they brought in 2 heavyweights analytically, Karim Qassam and Eugene Chen. And Qassam was gone before that season, and Eugene Chen was gone the following offseason.
Yeah.
And that to me is not a great sign.
Yeah.
And
okay.
So, to me, I agree with you from a, Peterson might be he's one of the best, I think, when it comes to game management. Absolutely agree with that. I think I think there's a lot to like there. There are a couple teams I would rather choose. So I said there were two teams I would debate between. They're both still on the board here.
That makes sense. No, I'm being a little too controversial. I don't think I'd even trust my own.
It's not controversial. I know you got your Paganelli bias.
Yeah, my own pick here. Well, I just love the Jags. Our Jags. Okay. Can I guess who your two teams may have been that you're going to look at? Okay, so I guess Minnesota, because we have some buy-in there, and then I guess I would say Buffalo, but there may be someone else also that goes in there.
Okay, so I'm gonna I don't want to reveal.
Oh, that's a good point.
I don't want to show you my hand here. I'm gonna take Minnesota here.
Yes,
you were right about that one. It's a little bit of blind faith because we don't have enough run, I think, of the Adolfo-Mensah era. But to me, you hire someone as general manager that's come up through the analytics ranks, is clearly willing to. I think we listen to what he's saying, if we listen also to what he's doing. So I think about that Jameson Williams trade, which you could. There certainly was a lot of debate over. By our numbers, it was a light win, and I think it just showed to me more than anything that he was willing to take actions that were backed up by quantitative analysis, rather than feeling like that was a great trade. It wasn't a great trade. It was a fine trade, maybe a very light win, but a lot less than you would expect on the market to get. But so it's like I said, it's a bit of a blind faith pick, but I have confidence in Minnesota's structure because of him going forward. So I would take Minnesota there. Yeah,
he's. I mean, he talks like it's exactly what I want to hear when I hear someone talking about different things. But yet, if I just did, sometimes for an interview, for instance, when they're auditioning.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying when they're doing, they develop this thing for if you're auditioning for some orchestra or something, they do blind, right? So you can't see the person, so you can't tell if it's a woman, the race of the person, anything like that. So you just are able to listen, right, to the music and to the instrument. And I feel like for him, if I didn't have his background and the interviews, which I think he does an excellent job, and the screen was put up, and I just saw his transactions so far, bringing Kirk Cousins back, this trade for T.J. Hawkinson, some of the other trades that moves have been made. I would be I don't know, nothing jumps out at me, at least from the actions yet. And that doesn't mean that it's not coming. And I think you're right. We don't just ignore the background and everything else like that. But I don't know. Sometimes I don't want to get too much into background and what they're saying, because I remember even in the offseason, I was kind of low on Mike McDaniel because he was really bad at answering questions about analytics and other stuff. I'm starting to think maybe now he's just he's one of these beautiful mind geniuses who can't get out a thought sometimes, because he's been really good during the season. So I don't know. Actions, I'm not quite there yet.
I say it's blind. Yeah. It's I agree with you. I kind of like the Hawkinson trade, but in general, it's not the things that Minnesota has done screams.
Yeah, I don't mind the Hawkinson deal. God, his draft capital though might make whatever contract. I mean, you're gonna have to make him the highest paid tight end in the NFL. That's not too bad now, though. In the NFL, I think. But we'll see. We'll see what it's like going forward. Maybe they just play out the 5th-year option and then don't have to worry about it. Okay, so for me, this is tough here because I'm pretty hard on the Buffalo Bills, actually, even though I was saying that they might be next on this one. So I have to figure out, is there anything else I could go to instead? Stability becomes a problem, though, for some of these teams. I don't know. I probably would go with the Bills next, but I'm going to say instead that, this is a tough one here. I don't know. I guess I am going to go with the Bills. I'll go with the Bills next, but I don't know. I got a lot of issues though. I got a lot of issues with
okay, you have issues.
with
Buffalo-
different things that they've done necessarily. So I'm not like 100% in on what they're doing. But other than that, it's tough with anyone with any sort of stability to think of.
Okay. I think the Bills, part of what I think is informed by what other analytics staffers think, and Buffalo's highly thought of. I think, one thing for me that stands out about Buffalo is their willingness to lean into their offensive advantage with Josh Allen. I mean, like, has there been a team that's shown in single games where they're like, we are not going to have running back runs? I mean, didn't they go a whole half, I think, last year in a game, where the whole first half we got a single running back run? I mean, be like, the ball is going to be thrown by Josh Allen or run by Josh Allen. And like, to me, that's good. That's maximizing their advantage. They know they have a great passing game. They know they ought to be passing the ball, including scrambles, as like a ton. And so I think Buffalo's good. What are your qualms?
I mean, some of the draft stuff I'm not super pleased about. I mean, I don't mind like the Stephon Diggs extension, but it just seemed like they're just throwing money at him for no reason, which I didn't quite necessarily understand under that scenario. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I don't think there's anything that's been bad there. I do like the idea of leaning into the pass, and that's going to come up, I think, in the future. I'm going to think about a different team, but maybe I'll just turn it over to you now to go ahead. Is there anyone else that you're willing to put into this bucket?
No, I think there's a serious teardrop after Buffalo. So
okay.
Yeah, I think it's really hard if you're asking me to pick the next team, but I'll do it if you want me to.
Yeah, no, let's go ahead and do it. I mean, even if it's something where, again, you don't have the sustainability necessarily.
I'm going to pick, and I think this would surprise some people, I'm going to pick San Francisco. And it's not because of fourth downs, right? That's like the most visible thing. Kyle Shanahan is in contention for like worst fourth down coach in the league. But I think that I'm stealing a thought from somebody, but I think like firstly, you are an organization where Adolfo Mensa came from, right? Originally, before going to Cleveland. I think that speaks highly to them. They have hired some smart people there. I think that there are people, and like when you talk to other teams, there are people like San Francisco is a team that people mention as being, I think for a couple of years now, I think people have said to me when I've done these sort of like follow-up interviews with off the analytics survey, like, if I had one more vote, I would have given it to San Francisco. I think San Francisco is right on the edge of this group. And so I think that's where I'll go, but it's a huge teardrop, I think, after Buffalo, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
You're not buying it. He's not buying it. And look, and let me say this, right? Like the decisions that they make. I mean, this is a team that invests in a running back at every opportunity, every possible chance they have. Like, what do we need? A running back. You just get running back, right? Like, I mean, I think the McCaffrey trade was bad. Just like I think almost all their. I know they because they drive you nuts, right? Like there's no team embodies the idea of running backs don't matter like San Francisco, who are constantly finding these players they didn't invest in who are outperforming the ones they did. But I think this is going to be more about what I hear from people with regard to that organization as opposed to the headline moves they've made or Shanahan's fourth down decisions.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can give you that. I mean, it's just like some of the process related stuff. Who knows? You never know what's going on behind the scenes, but like the Trey Lance trade up.
I know.
He has pretty reliable sources. And I got sources, #sources, that have told me, of course, this is like third-hand sources, that like they heard from very reliable people in San Francisco that it was going to be Mac Jones beforehand. And then it ends up being Trey Lance. And then I would say there's probably a 25% chance right now, this is my very analytical estimation, that like those picks are just worthless now because they're just going to like have to bring Jimmy back or something next season.
I mean, like, horrible trade. And like, also if it was for Jones, you didn't need to trade all the way up there for him. It's like at least based on what, who knows, but like what people thought at the time, people didn't think he was going to go that high.
But anyway, okay. Well, how about this? Okay, let me just throw some names out at you. Maybe we don't have to pick it. What do you think about the Giants as being like Buffalo, but Eastern New York, Buffalo?
I like it. I think there's a real chance it turns into that. I guess we don't know.
Okay, yeah, I like that too.
Pass on Barkley, and then we'll find out.
Yeah. I get a little bit annoyed by everyone. At least it's died down as they've been losing games. The whole Brian Daboll is like single-handedly changed everything in the world. What about on the flip side of you're talking about like that Vikings trade? What do you think about the Detroit Lions?
I think the Lions are interesting.
They're not well staffed. That's for sure. But Dan Campbell seems pretty good. I'm not against their moves necessarily that they've made with some teams. They got a decent deal for Stafford now. That Rams pick, that's gonna be nice. It's gonna be a nice pick. That's gonna be a nice pick that they're gonna have here. They get a quarterback. It could be in business.
I mean, I like the direction of things. Like overall in this Holmes era, I think that I like the direction of the general moves that Detroit's made. I think that Campbell certainly is a fourth down guy, but like, I think in general, what they've done has been pretty solid. Yeah. Getting the future first, which is like a thing that NFL teams don't value enough, is like the non-immediate, like in basketball, all these teams want the far away first because it could be so good. And in football, it's like the Panthers passing on the Rams for future firsts, like presumably because they don't get those picks now, where it's like, no, that's a feature, not a bug. I think that they're setting themselves up to be in a decent place. Like, they make some bets on guys like DJ Chark, and it's like, it's not like he's done it, but like I'm saying, like make these sort of like short bets. Why not? Find out if you hit somewhere. And I think they're set themselves up for like a decent spot if they can get a quarterback in this next draft, which they probably will. And they give themselves a chance. Like, might as well have done what they did as opposed to like try and cobble together an extra win in a losing season.
Now, what about former analytics darling Brandon Staley and the Chargers?
Heel
turn. I know he did a heel turn on us this year, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. I don't know what happened here because something I think happened, right? You have this, like you said, analytics darling. And then to me, this is the reason why I think it's so weird is like he did this press in the offseason talking about fourth down decisions and like did a big, my old colleague, Daniel Popper, and with The Athletic did a big story with him. And he's talking about how, his own inferences, his own, how you like your own flaws, thinking about things in the moment. And that's why it's better to rely on the data. And like, he's saying all the right things, right? After having had his rookie coach season. And then this year he's like, I feel like it's being underrated. Like he has become one of what I would say is been one of the worst fourth down coaches this year. And I think there's like, I can think of three theories. I'll tell you if you tell me if you hear any more. The first one is like, he really didn't believe in his defense last year. And so he wanted to go for it like crazy. The problem, and now he believes in his defense because he has like some extra stars. The problem is like, that's like a lot of work to like go and say like all of these like quote unquote right, smart things as a cover story. I guess that's possible, but the real problem is that like their defense also isn't good now. So like that wouldn't hold up. And when you're playing the Chiefs, which, when he was conservative against the Chiefs, it's like everybody's defense is bad when you're playing against the Chiefs. So that really didn't make sense. He gave a press conference where he said all of these like old, basically like anachronistic reasons to not go for it. And it was like
the field. When people were talking about flipping the field, you got
and momentum. And like, it's like if you took an analytics person there's like that meme, like if you're being held hostage and you need to let people know without tipping anyone off, like that. Like if you had an analytics person, it was like that was the bingo card. It was impressive. So the second theory I would say is like he just got scared. The press like got to him. All of the hate got to him. But that doesn't make sense either because like because of like the work that they did talking about going forward on fourth down in the offseason, and then right away something changed this year, and it just doesn't. I mean, it's probably the Occam's razor answer, but to me, it's like, it's just odd. And then the third is ownership intervention, which like, I'm not reporting anything. I have no, I just want to be clear. Like I have no sense on that, but like, how could you not think that is a feasible answer here? Because it's been such a behavioral change. Am I missing something? Is there something else that you think could be the reason why we've seen this change?
No, I mean, I think the ownership is definitely something that could be happening. I don't get the bullying by media. I don't think that doesn't really make any sense to me. But I guess from him, what I'll say is I always got a little bit of a vibe while he was saying the right things. Sometimes we ignored the fact that he wasn't really saying the right things about being overly aggressive. And we're just like, well, it's aggressive. Like he went for it, so it's good. There were some times where he seemed to have some vibe based decisions to go for it when maybe shouldn't have gone for it. And we don't say anything in those sorts of circumstances. So I think part of it, I'm just looking at like their conversions versus expectation on fourth downs by game and the amount of expected points they were adding on this one. I mean, last season, they were just on such a hot streak to start the season. They were converting over and over again. They're adding massive win probability. They win the Cleveland game because of it. They win the Chiefs game because of it to start the season. And then it kind of peters out a little bit at the end of the season. And it starts off pretty bad to this season, not great. And it's been generally bad so far this season. So some of it could just be that. It reminds me a little bit of like when their kicker got injured, the Steelers started going for two. This is like Mike Tomlin, right? A number of years ago. And they were making it over and over again. They're like, hey, let's just keep doing this. Tomlin didn't have any belief. You just start to think that like you start to fall into these traps of like, I'm 4 of my last 5 and I have a better chance now on my 6th try than if I would have been 1 out of 5, when the reality is you're much closer to whatever the original base rate would be.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That's like, I guess I would put that in the second bucket, but that means you didn't believe. That means you didn't like, and so that's like why I think it's shocking, is because like it means it was not real the whole time. You're right about the aggressive ones. Like I think like at the end of last year, people would ask us like for our like our sort of summary statistics of fourth down, and like the Staley did not look quote good in those, and the reason was because he'd made 2 one incredibly aggressive. I think there were 2 though moves that were
Kansas City one where they won, where they went for like 4th and 9 or something like that, and they were in field goal range and they were only down by a little bit. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, there was that one for sure. I remember.
Huge win probability sacrificed by them going for it and so that was like and so it's true, we did, and they won that game, so people did kind of wash over it. I remember being like totally flummoxed though about why so yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, I'm fascinated by this one. I really am, because it's weird. I'll just like, to me, it's weird.
Yeah, I don't have any window into what they're doing there, but they do not have a whole lot going on in their analytics area there, and traditionally have not. And they've had, the GM's been there a while.
Well, they have a few folks.
Telesco's been there a while.
From Cleveland's there. Alex.
Yeah, Stern, I know, but he's been there for like 2 years or something like that. Like he's already. I'm just saying he would have been like the most junior person in Cleveland, and now he's like the most senior person there, and they've added someone else, but who knows who knows? Again, I have no window into what they're doing there, so I don't know what sort of heft or ability they have to influence things, but that would be one other one. And then one thing that I'll mention, And, for however much we hate game management and everything else from Andy Reid, I will say that this kind of goes into like your Josh Allen point of like, at least he doesn't care about like the football guidedness of running the ball. I know you could say easy, he has Patrick Mahomes, he has Travis Kelce, he had Tyreek Hill, he had all this other stuff. But like, I still feel like if you just shuffle up coaches and you just randomly assign this exact roster to coaches, rarely you're going to get a team that's going to, easily lead the league in kind of passing over expectation every single year. I remember when they went to the playoffs a couple of years ago, Bill Cowher was interviewing Reid before the game, and he was like, "Hey, you know how you win when you run the ball, they would have just like threw the ball 50 straight times and destroyed the competition." Like still, so many people believe in that. So as all the win probability he gives up in these other areas, if you take for the fact that if you lowered their pass percentage by like 5%, 5 to 10%, and you said now you're substituting, 50 to 100 Patrick Mahomes dropbacks for running plays during the season, that probably has a bigger effect than the negatives, a bigger positive effect than all the negatives that we talk about with them.
I agree. I think that's like a totally fair compliment, which I think is true. Like, you really like there will be a lot of coaches that would want to run the ball way more with Patrick Mahomes, and Andy Reid doesn't care about that.
Yeah, so he gets it from that sort of level. Even though, for the love of God, just hire someone to do your time management and other decisions there. All right, anyone else you want to mention before I let you out of here?
No, I think that's it. I mean, certainly there's good people all across the league, but I think those are the teams that jump out to me, the ones that we talked about.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what we have to be happy about here is we'll see what happens with the Bears and some others with some younger front office people there. We have to be happy about it. If we had this discussion 5 years ago, it would have been like, yeah, got nothing for it. I got nothing. It would have been like Sashi, and that would have been about it. And then he would have got fired 9 months later. Okay, Seth, I know you're on Twitter at Seth Walder. You have your survey coming out next week of analytics staffers. Anything else you want to plug before I let you out of here?
No, I think that's right. I would just say we talked about the receiver tracking metrics at the top. If you can find those on 538, and we're really happy that we're able to share like all of that. You can see all the outputs, look back at players historically as far back as we have.
Going back to 2017, you can combine seasons, individual seasons, search for players, all that different stuff.
Yep. So I have fun playing around with that. I like looking at it. I hope folks do too.
Yeah, this has been great. I'm going to dig into it further and further and probably post some stuff about it. For everyone who's tuning in, thank you so much for making it here to the end of the podcast. If you want, go ahead, rate, review the pod, leave comments on YouTube. If you're watching it via YouTube, I tend to, glance at those that are not psychotic. And most of your comments are pretty good, I have to say. I have a good audience on there. Otherwise, I'm going to let everyone go, and then I'll be wrapping up Thursday Night Football on Friday. Thanks, everybody.